Charger hardware and supporting infrastructure is typically the focal point in deployment discussions, but the layer underneath the chargers are rarely discussed. And if that layer is slow, poorly designed, difficult to scale, or impossible to upgrade later, the entire deployment model starts breaking down. In today's episode of Field Frequency, I'm joined by Trevor Palmer, founder of EVBlocks, to talk about what Europe figured out earlier than the US. We talk about why deployment bottlenecks are stalling projects and how infrastructure decisions made during construction can create years of downstream operational pain. The conversation gets into site design, future-proofing, deployment speed, and the hidden realities underneath EV charging infrastructure. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Field Frequency, powered by Field Advantage, an IT field services company specializing in the maintenance, operation of critical infrastructure, including EV charging networks. Today, I'm happy to have Trevor Palmer, founder of EVBlocks, with us today. Trevor's joining us from the UK, so afternoon there and morning time here in Texas. Glad we were able to align our schedules to get you on Field Frequency. Trevor, how you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, we're doing good. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Would like to kick off the conversation, give us your origin story, walk us through your background, the path that led you into EV infrastructure, and then what the inflection points that pushed you from your electrical and construction background into, founding EVBlocks. And then after that, if you could, give us an overview of EVBlocks, what you're doing in the space.
Sure. So I'm an electrician by trade, so that's where it all kind of started. I built up a electrical contracting business over a number of years. During that period, we were asked to start undertaking the installations, and we were just started off with the electrical part, and then we started moving into full turnkey, doing all the civil engineering works, tarmac reinstatement works, the line marking, and the installation of the electrical installation of the actual EV chargers as well. One thing we were finding, we were doing this for car dealerships such as Audi and Volkswagen, those kind of showrooms. And when the projects came along, they wanted them delivered in a really fast timescale. So in the beginning, we were doing poured concrete pads for the electric vehicle pedestals, and that was causing like a bit of a lag in terms of being able to get each project over the line, waiting for concrete to dry. So we came up with a couple of precast solutions, and then we wanted to make it so that it was universal, and we had a bit more space to work inside of the foundation. So I designed the initial EVBlocks concept, and then we started to install those foundations, and we subsequently launched an entire EVBlocks brand off the back of it as well.
Yeah, and so this prefab design is essentially streamlining the deployment. To your point of the waiting for concrete to cure, that whole process. EVBlocks product is really about bypassing some of the delays and really escalating the installation or reducing the time to deployment. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's right. We saved about a week per project.
Wow.
By sort of streamlining this. And we were also able to kind of divorce the electrical contractors and the civils guys. Electricians knew every time they went to site they were going to get an EVBlock to mount their EV charger to. Only that, if it's raining outside, they could take that adapter plate off, take it in the workshop on all the pedestals, walk back out, straight on, and then they've just got the wiring stage to do. So they could do all the mechanical works in the dry, and then the last little bit, connecting up the cables and glanding off in the field. Hopefully by then it stopped raining.
Yeah. So obviously different designs of footprint for different chargers. There's, different sizes of chargers, both in terms of output, which are determining the substructure of the unit. How I'm assuming you've got a platform for various different brands of hardware to.
Yeah, so our product is the same product every time, so it gives that consistent look across like an estate. And then we've got like a working range of pedestals that will fit onto the EVBlocks products. So the majority of Type 2 or Level 2 chargers, as they're more well known in the US, will fit on our standard EV block product.
Okay. And what about DC fast charging products? Is EVBlocks got a solution for DC fast chargers?
Yeah, so in the UK, we launched what we call the B800, which is a 800 millimeter by 800 millimeter cube that has a single entry point, and then the cables can come through the center. And we have like a match plate between the foundation and the DC charger. And then we just released the kind of sister product to that in the US, which is going to be the DC foundation, and that is available now in the US.
Nice. You made a distinction there when you referred to, AC powered charging level twos, how, kind of we referred to it in the US, you referred to it as type two. So, obviously I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you're based in the UK, the UK and working in the US market though. And so I have a question regarding the distinctions between the European market and maybe deployments in the US. Being based in a part of the global market where EV infrastructure deployment is more mature than maybe here in the US. When you started spending time in the American market, when you started bringing EVBlocks to the US, what stood out to you as maybe something inefficient or slow, or what stood out to you from a deployment standpoint versus what you saw uh, where you're from?
I think I was very surprised by the kind of the adoption of precast in America. It's really heavy precast in the States compared to the UK, I feel, and kind of opens the doors then to scalability because EVBlocks, we've got these held in inventory in the US, ready to load onto the back of the truck and go to a site. So that kind of the American way of scalability really kind of opened my eyes a bit in terms of this is if we want to operate in the US, then we need to make this really scale well. And we've achieved that with probably about 20 production locations across America. So there's local distribution of a heavy product. And then in terms of adoption, like Europe, I think there's a push here in Europe because fuel costs are so high compared with the US. Still, it's a tough sell in the US to go electric with the price of gas.
Yeah. Fuel is creeping up there, and it's been fully EV for some time now, so I haven't paid too much close attention to fuel cost of fuel. Traveling this past weekend, of course, in a rental, gas powered vehicle, getting ready to return the vehicle to the airport. Wow, $100 for filling up a little small 16-gallon tank, something like that, $100 for that. So yeah, the pain points around pricing you would think would be escalating that shift, or at least maybe considerations, or escalating the considerations around EV. So, kind of looking at deployment bottlenecks, because you made mention of the scalability here in the US and deployments around that. Focus always seems to be on charger brands and software, output levels of the charger. Not always is their focus around the granularity of deployment and maybe that layer underneath of the chargers, that layer underneath. And what do you think that the industry underestimated in the US when it came to that lower layer of deployment?
I think people like Tesla have done well to put that supercharging network in place, and it's kind of proved that it can be done. And then you've got other players like ChargePoint kind of following in their footsteps, Rivian trying to build their own adventure network as well. It'd be interesting to see how that pans out. I think there's more thought going into future-proofing sites now than when there was in the first deployments, and how these sites are going to mature. Whereas I think early on it was just get pins in the ground so that people can charge on their journey. And now these sites might be constrained by the actual land parcel that they've been built on. So I think the bigger CPOs are looking at larger sites and with capacity. So they might put 20 chargers in and then have capacity for 20 more when they see utilization come up. So there's definitely there's more scope around what's this going to look like in future.
Mm-hmm. Only, you call out a good points, constraints around, the green space, the ability to, have more spacing, more parking, et cetera, but also the underestimation around the deployment, because not only is there some limitations around sites for, in terms of green space, but also in terms of infrastructure. And so if there was an undersizing of the site to begin with, then obviously expansion could be cost prohibitive or even, impossible to some extent. I've been a part of projects in the past where just getting incoming service to a site was more than the cost of the chargers and the cost of the electrical construction. So you mentioned, your background is as an electrical contractor, so you're an electrician by trades. I'm sure looking at a deployment from the standpoint of economics and not only, mentioning speed, you've probably seen money getting burned up during deployment delays and not necessarily just labor, permitting drag, equipment that's idle, utility coordination, et cetera. But, what really gets the projects off or derailed, you might say, and behind schedule from your perspective, kind of looking at it from, your background as a contractor?
I think it's what the customer wants versus reality can be somewhat skewed. So the customer might want 5 rapid chargers. You look at it and then you start drawing up, well, this is where we'd locate them on site. Then you go back to the grid and say, look, we want like this kind of size connection, and there's nothing available in that local area. And then you're kind of the bad guy to go back to the client and say, you can't have those 5 chargers you wanted, or at least you can't have them powered by the grid because either capacity is not there or it's cost prohibitive. There are other solutions available like battery storage on site. Again, you need that physical space, trickle charge or battery storage to power some rapid chargers. But again, you're looking at large capex for these kind of solutions. So customer really wants it, they can have it, but it can really slow down business in terms of where you thought that job was going to come in and it was going to be a 5 charger job, and now it's completely strike through on the list and move on to the next one.
Yeah. When you talk about expansion or the sizing constraints, to your point of 5 rapid chargers, this is what we want. When we kind of take a step back, and this has come up on the show a few times, where early on DC deployments, rapid charging was defined as 50 kilowatts of output. So obviously 50 kilowatts is we didn't even take a look at that today. I mean, unless maybe inside of a fleet depot context, there's certainly an application in that sense. But public retail, charging those destinations. And it would seem that EVBlocks has understood that chargers change over time, and what's deployed probably may not be there. Where I could see that EVBlocks is needing to design a product that accommodates the site, but also, like I said, the difference in footprints and the different sizing of the charger. I don't know. Would you agree with that? Maybe sometimes, at least early on, many sites were being built like that charger that was installed would be the one that is there forever without considerations for technology changes.
Yeah, we see now a lot, like you say, where people think, well, now we've got EV chargers, that's it, we're done. And it actually, the reality is some sites we're seeing where they're on the 3rd version of an EV charger being installed. Now, where they're on a concrete pad, that kind of concrete pad either looks like a piece of Swiss cheese because it's had multiple holes with multiple fixing arrangements put on it, or they've had to break it out and start again and recast that. The sites where they've used our product, they've been able to just remove the adapter plate, put on a new adapter plate and fix the new pedestal and fix arrangements to that new plate. There's another benefit in terms of leased sites as well, where they're actually able to take the hardware away and leave an adapter plate in place. So there's no hole in the ground. There's no cables sticking up out of the ground. When that lease is handed back over, they're asked to put the building back to what it was. At least it's a safe condition that would be acceptable to a landlord.
Yeah, and I would see that with the deployment. I mean, I'm thinking of literally 2 projects that are in our pipeline right now, where it's literally the demo of a site. It's not the replacement of the chargers, it's not upgrading the chargers, but it's the demolition of the site because the site is closed and the chargers that are there are aged and legacy units, and the incoming tenant's not unknown at this point. So the owner of the property is like, let's scrub the site. And so we're going to get, we've already done the site assessment. There's no EVBlocks. There's nothing there. We're literally going to be tearing up concrete. We're going to be cutting bollards, and where the space, the cavity of the charger that's going to be left, we're going to be left with having to address that. And it's not just, pulling the wire and capping conduit, but we're going to have to address the footprint because of where it sits there in relation to the site. So yeah, I find that the solution that EVBlocks has brought to market is compelling and important from a deployment standpoint, which is why I wanted to get you on the show and talk about it. I'm curious about when you brought EVBlocks to the U.S. when you came in to this market, what did you encounter? What was the market? Was the market immediately receptive to the solution, or were people trying to understand where your product's value sat in the value chain, where how they would use your was kind of that reaction to your solution?
Yeah, so we launched in the US at the NICA show in Texas a few years ago. We had an interesting response from contractors who came to visit the stand, and they were kind of like, it was early doors for them. So they were like, this is a good idea. And then where we saw government subsidies or support for EV charging, those states in particular, we see a rapid takeoff in terms of sales for EVBlocks. But where there wasn't that kind of support, it was less obvious that much EV was happening.
That makes sense. It would almost seem like there was a conversation that already had to have been happening for your solution to make the most sense, and the value of your solution to kind of resonate with the site. That's fair. It makes sense. Even in some of the regions where EV adoption is further along than other parts of the country, there's still misunderstandings around product. There's still gaps in the knowledge base around deployment and infrastructure and what it really means to deploy level 2 chargers or DC fast chargers. Even in the wide gap, I can't, we've all experienced it where, we get a call, we've got someone that wants to deploy chargers, and pricing that's been forecast around that site for DC is not even up to par for a level 2 deployment, much less DC fast charge. I've heard of budgets being allocated for DC deployments, and the cost alone to cover cabling and conduit wasn't even really there. But yeah, it's there's a knowledge gap, so I could see where you'd have an immediate reaction to the product. So, I wanted to get off into the conversation around reliability and maintenance and kind of the hidden cost of future problems. The unknown unknowns. A lot of uptime conversations are focused on software or hardware failure. That's kind of where things get, they're obvious, they're seen. But how much of the future maintenance pains are evident from your perspective that really starts with bad site planning or maybe rush deployment decisions during construction?
Yeah, we see this more often than what we'd like to, where contractors, especially when I was contracting and we were delivering, where we were not responsible for doing the civil engineering part, we would go to site and the bases would not be level, or the actual finish of the concrete pad was pretty poor. Either it was, not that strong for actually putting the fixings into the concrete slab, where they've just not put enough cement into the mix when they've been making that pad, or like I say, just a really rough and poor condition. You can't get the pedestal level without shimming it up, so it looks like a bit of a dog's dinner, and that kind of has a knock-on effect. So I'm sending electricians to a site, they're ringing me up, they're sending me photos of, this is the condition of the pad. What do you want us to do? Do you want to terminate here? And then we're into aborted visit costs. So we've got sunk cost in terms of guys going out the door, fuel, potentially hotel rooms to then do a revisit. Now, yeah, you're going to get paid if you've got a good client, but you're going to have that difficult conversation. We've gone to site as per your request, but your civil engineering element is really poor. So the extra bill for the end user or client, they're not going to be happy about that. Plus the guys, they want to go to work. They don't want to be just traveling up and down the motorway or freeway. So the blocks, with it being kind of scalable and consistent every time, just eliminates any of that grey area. The electricians know what they're going to turn up to every time. And before they've even got out of the van, they already know what kit they're going to need, straight to it. So that was one of the nice bits that we were finding when we were deploying the blocks and the chargers alike. And I think it also allows you to then quickly change the hardware if required. It's a pretty straightforward, simple process. And also, if you need to pull in additional cables through that conduit system, you've got good access all the way through. Because the EVBlocks, not only are they a foundation for the EV charger, but they're a good place for access, like cable chambers for pulling the cables through. So kind of a 2-in-1.
I'd be curious about your perspective from, let's, like I said, you're in Europe. Europe is further along in terms of adoption and has been generally, at least from my perspective and from what I've heard, never really worked in that market, but just from my learnings, it seems that the European market has generally been able to deploy charging infrastructure faster and more efficiently than perhaps here in the US. And I would be curious about your opinion. What is driving that? Is it policy? Is it construction methods? Is it the way the utility is engaged or supportive of the deployment? What does that look like? How has that been seemingly deployed more efficiently?
I think this is my personal opinion. I think it comes down to the user experience in terms of energy and fuel is getting so expensive here that the argument not to do it is getting less and less. So it's getting cheaper to deploy solar panels on your house. Those solar panels can charge a car. The fuel duty on UK fuel is phenomenal. So if you can charge a car with sunlight, you're going to start looking down that route and go thinking, yeah, do you know what? Makes a lot more sense. And then that drives the adoption in terms of demand for electric vehicles. And then the guys putting in the heavy infrastructure can see that demand and then they really want to get to it. That's where we've seen a lot of big players in the DC market buying up land parcels and delivering EV charging hubs and raising large amounts of money to develop good sized networks of electric car charging.
I know when we're working with an emerging CPO or an aspirational CPO or someone, for whatever reason they've decided to get into the charging business and they're looking at sites. I can imagine that you've, from your perspective, maybe have seen some differences. And I'd be curious, what differences do you notice between maybe mature infrastructure buyers versus new entrants in the European market? What questions from your deployment, because you've been deploying chargers, you've been in that, and what questions do you see that experienced operators know to ask that maybe inexperienced deployers or buyers completely overlook?
I think the smart guys here in the UK, they're looking at the land parcels in terms of volume of traffic going past that location and grid connection from the get-go before they've even made an offer on the land or got close to that parcel or that proposal. They did a lot of research before they even put pen to paper or start typing an email to say we're interested in this piece of land.
What happens when deployment really scales? And you can answer this from the perspective of maybe the US or your market or both. But maybe from the start, maybe if the US actually was to reach deployment numbers that everyone is looking towards, maybe 2030, 2035, or at least that is comparable to other parts of the globe, what would have to break or change in our current system? That's really from the US perspective. And maybe what operational changes do we need that is used in maybe Europe? What needs to happen in that respect? So for us to get to the next, get around this curve and onto the next.
I think I'm relatively new in terms of driving electric vehicle day to day. The biggest rub for me is kind of that user experience.
Mm.
Some of the fast chargers, like Tesla, for example, turn up, plug in, thanks very much, charge my car,
Mhm.
like charge my card. That's the kind of experience we want to kind of get to. There's other chargers, plug in, authenticate, on and off charge. That's pretty good. And then there's others where I've had experience where you need to download this app, scan this QR code, muck around, and I'd rather not charge. I'd find somewhere else. So I think making it seamless for the user is one, and the other is, I hate to say it, more education or more. Like you drive an electric car, these things are fast,
Mhm.
like real fast. And people still don't. They think electric car is like, oh, it'll be okay. This thing, they'll put you in the back of your seat, no problem.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of cool as kind of a petrol head, to have converted over to electric vehicle, seen that I'll actually like driving electric vehicle now,
Mm.
and people having the ability to test drive these cars and trucks and stuff like that, and actually try them out and live with them for a bit. I think once you've tried it, it's kind of nice, and you don't want to go back to petrol or diesel. All the little toys in the middle of the winter when your windscreen's covered in ice, you go out, the car's already preconditioned, warm. It's like, yeah, great. Nice little features like that just makes it a lot better. And you're not walking through a cloud of diesel in the morning whilst you've been waiting for the windscreen to defrost. So yeah, education of electric cars can do the range that they talk with, that it says on the dashboard.
Mhm.
They're comfortable, quick, the charging experience, certainly here in the UK, has changed a lot recently, where it's a lot easier to just get in the car and don't even think about where you're going to charge, because there's a lot of charge points. That confidence level of I'm not going to get stranded is there. So yeah, people's confidence in not getting stuck. Those would be my big ones, I think.
To your point of the acceleration, I know, again, going back to the reference of my rental this past weekend, trying to change lanes, trying to navigate through an urban area and get up and get in the right lane that I needed to be in to get on down the road. And I was, conditioned to the fast acceleration of my electric vehicles. And wow, when I put my foot in the pedal and was trying to merge over and get down the road, I just bogged down. I was like, wow, you shift from EV back to, a petrol vehicle or, diesel powered vehicle. Well, maybe not so much diesel, depending on what truck it is, but yeah, you might get hurt trying to get over, because whereas the Tesla's gone, it's already over and moved and down the road. But yeah, well, Trevor, I appreciate you coming on Field Frequency and sharing some time with us today. For those that are watching, obviously they can see EVBlocks.com on your shirt. But for those that are listening, how could they connect with you, learn more about EVBlocks, learn more from you about what you're doing in your market locally? And then, of course, you made mention EVBlocks has 20 distribution centers here in the U.S. For those that want to connect with you, obviously EVBlocks. But where else can folks that are listening connect with you, Trevor?
Yeah, so we've got production locations across the US, Canada, France, Australia, and here in the UK and Ireland. We are very active on LinkedIn and on Instagram, so you can find us on there as well. Just same kind of handle, EVBlocks.
Good. Very good. And just curious, what's lead time for most of your product line? What's lead time?
So here in the UK, you can have it tomorrow.
Wow.
In the US, it's between 1 and 2 days in the US if you're really in a jam.
Wow. So tomorrow in Europe and 1 to 2 days in the US, that's a pretty slick lead time. You're going to be way ahead of the chargers as far as their readiness to ship to site. So you're ready to go today. Sounds like that's good.
Yeah.
Trevor, thanks for being on Field Frequency. It was a pleasure to have you.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. This episode was produced and edited by the team at Autozy. To find out more, visit autozy.co, AUTOZY.co.